And selamat datang. I will not be speaking in Bahasa for the rest of the afternoon, so you can see the sigh of relief. My name is Julia. I am Malaysian, from Malaysia. And I'll just start off with a little bit about myself. Okay, we have officially started, by the way, in case I didn't make that clear. I was a news editor with a little known website in Malaysia called The Malaysian Insider. That was 2 to 3 years ago. Now, The Malaysian Insider, TMI, it ran for about 8 years, during which time bringing alternative take on news from Malaysia and the region. Now, in early 2016, the site was banned by the government for a month. This happened about 2 months after 3 of our lead editors were jailed for a night over an article that we ran about the Malaysian royalty. Less than a month after our ban was lifted, 61 colleagues and myself found ourselves jobless with a 1 day's notice after our owners, the Edge Media Group, decided to shut us down. So just a little bit of history for all of you here. TMI was not the first, and it certainly will not be the last news website in Malaysia, in this region, even in the world, to shut down, or at least to be threatened with being shut down. That's the reality of the news industry, especially in this region, where most of Southeast Asian media, with very few exceptions, are owned by the government or by corporations with links to the government. There is, needless to say, a great need for more credible, independent news sites in this region. Sites that tell stories that reflect the reality on the ground. So this brings me to when I first met PJ, whom I believe most of you know, most of you in this room know. In January of this year, I had breakfast with PJ in Kuala Lumpur, where he was telling me about a rough idea that he had about a website that would tell these stories, that would tell the stories of Southeast Asia, not just the doom and the gloom, but the beauty of Southeast Asia from a Southeast Asian perspective. I was really blown away. I really believe that there is a need for that. You can never have too many of that in this region. But the first question I asked PJ after he sold me on the idea was, but how are you going to sustain this financially? How is this going to last? Back to the Malaysian Insider. At the Malaysian Insider's peak, we were averaging 2 million page views a day. But the page views translated into nothing as far as advertisements were concerned. Why? Because obviously the stories that we covered didn't always sit very well with the authorities. We struggled greatly to try to balance between reporting what was true and reporting what would not offend advertisers. So the Edge Media Group eventually cited a lack of sustainability as the reason for shutting us down. How much that is true, well, we'll need to ask the Edge Media Group owners. But the fact does remain that we were struggling to survive financially. We were struggling to pay salaries for all 62 of the staff. So that brings us to another problem of the news industry in Southeast Asia. But I'm not going to give away too much yet. And I realize I may have started on a little bit of a low note, so I apologize for that. We're here today to start a very positive conversation. So yeah, I'm going to now introduce the next speaker to tell us a little bit more about this little idea that I first heard about in KL 9 months ago. And to do that, I'd like you to warmly welcome PJ.
Thanks, Julia. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm really gratified to see so many of you here today. It's been a long journey, but I'm very excited. For those of you who don't know, back in 2012, I came back to Singapore after I graduated from Oxford, and I got a job at the National University of Singapore. And I started doing what an academic is supposed to do: research and write and talk about the truth. After I published my work on Operation Cold Store in 2013, 2014, three things happened. The first is that things actually changed. The Singapore government dropped their long-held position that the detainees of Operation Cold Store were part of some communist conspiracy and that they had evidence of it. They don't say that anymore. Now they say that the detentions of Operation Cold Store, whether or not morally justified or legally justified, were a necessary precondition for Singapore's current prosperity. The second thing which happened was that I was told that I could no longer work in Singapore, that I was blacklisted, that no university here would ever hire me, that I would never be able to be an academic in Singapore again. The third thing that happened was, for me, the most important thing, which was at the book launch of commemorating Operation Cold Store in 2013, which some of you here were at. I got a chance to speak with many former detainees. And this memory always cheers me up because of how powerful it is. This old man, he came up to me and he told me that because of my work, he knew that he was not part of a, unwittingly part of a communist conspiracy. That, oh gosh, sorry.
So the second row is
sorry. That because of my work, he could look his children and his family in the eye again. And he said to me, PJ, you've given me my pride and my dignity back. Sorry, I'll do my best to hold it together. I always cry when I tell that story, because it shows that the work we do makes a difference. The truth can make a difference in people's lives. And since then, two questions have occupied me. The first is that, how can I come home? I went back to Oxford. I had a nice job. I got a pretty good position. I run the Southeast Asia program. Who wouldn't want to be an Oxford Don? But it's not my home. Southeast Asia is my home. And the second is, how can I come home and make this region a better place? And fight for the truth, and empower others to do what I've done. Because it's not enough that I do it. We all have to do it. Julia talked about the challenges we face telling the truth in Southeast Asia. And our need to overcome these challenges is greater than ever. We are living in an inflection point in history. We're truly privileged because very few people get to do that. The past 40 years, the neoliberal consensus, the sort of moral climate that has dictated our lives, is breaking down. The moral and economic consensus, right? The moral imperatives which used to drive our development, they're breaking down. We face an uncertain future. We are facing new challenges. How do we change ourselves and our economy to meet these new challenges? How do we change? They need new ways of thinking. But only a well-informed people working together can create a better world. We can do it, but we need to do it together, all of us. And the opportunities are here. We also live in a time where this is a moment in human history where technology can allow us to build a new media organization that brings together artists and academics and writers and journalists, and empower people to build a better society. The people of Southeast Asia want and deserve something better than what we have. You deserve something better than what we have. Something more meaningful, something more empathetic. The only question is, do we have the courage to grasp it? So, I had these conversations with Sunny, with Kirsten, with Julia, with others, and a consensus emerged. We felt the solution needed to have 5 core characteristics. The first is that it has to be Southeast Asian. Our region is deeply interconnected. We cannot solve our problems merely within national borders. The haze, SARS, the current refugee crisis. Our cost of living in Singapore is determined as much by the domestic economies of the Philippines and Indonesia and Cambodia. So we must see the region for what it is. It's one. And it must be relevant and meaningful to the people of Southeast Asia. It should ask not just big questions about big things, but big questions about the little things which matter to each and every one of us every day. It should be written by people who understand the region deeply and care about it and understand it in very nuanced ways. Second, the stories must be evidence-driven. It should help you cut through the noise and the exhausting flood of information that we are showered with every day, right? It should explain and explore the forces which unconsciously shape our lives. It should explain all these forces which shape how we think, how we see the world, and so that we have context to understand these things which are happening to us and help us make better decisions. The third is that it needs to be innovative. The old forms don't work. The world is changing rapidly. The way people access, share, and respond to information is also changing. We need to design for how people actually live, not how we want people to live. We want to reach people across different media, and not just text, but audio, visual media. We want to find new voices, new perspectives. And so for this to succeed then, it needs to build a community. It's not about a one-way street, but people, it needs to be a community. Is it working now? Cool. Thank you. Right. Thank you. A community of active participants, of intellectually curious and engaged individuals who believe in the importance of the truth of the media and who want to reach out and work together across Southeast Asia. It needs to be a movement. And most of all, and maybe this is the most important thing, it needs to embody its values. It needs to be directly accountable to its members, the people who matter. There must always be clarity about who is important, who is in charge, and that's the members. The whole thing must be built from the ground up to have clarity about values and structured in a way that we always remain true to our mission. People need to be able to trust us, or we are nothing. That's a really tough list. Can we do it? Let's find out.